So have you ever gone to visit a friend who you haven't seen in years? And when you first see them, you're kind of shocked because they don't look like they did the last time you saw them. Could be a good thing, could be maybe a not so good thing. They either look better than when you last saw them or maybe not so much. But you know that shock that you feel in that situation. Well, today we're going to see that the Apostle John kind of has a shocking experience like that. We are in week 2 of our study through the book of Revelation. And last time we started with the introduction. We looked at the first 11 verses, and we saw that this book is written by the Apostle John, and it is the revelation of Jesus Christ and some of the things that must take place leading up to his return. Well, today we're going to wrap up chapter 1, and we're going to look at John's description of Jesus, of what he saw in this vision of what Jesus looked like, and some of the things that Jesus said. So to keep it in context, we're going to back up a couple verses. We're going to start with verse 10. So let's begin by looking at Revelation chapter 1, verses 10 through 16. John writes, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, saying, Write what you see in a book, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, and to Smyrna, and to Pergamum, and to Thyatira, and to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. And his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. John paints quite a picture there of what he saw. Remember, John's opening lines, from the way he opens this book, this is the revelation of Jesus Christ. Through this book, God is revealing to the church information about Jesus, what Jesus is saying, and some events that are going to take place leading up to his eventual return. In verses 13 through 16, John tries to describe for us what Jesus looked like in his vision. John heard a loud voice. He said it was a loud voice like a trumpet. And he turned around to see who was speaking. And what he saw was nothing like anyone else has ever seen. It doesn't look like anyone has ever seen. So we're going to go piece by piece through John's description and realize all throughout this book is very symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism and a lot of things that have multiple meanings throughout this book. So we're going to take a look at John's description and how he described Jesus and what that description might mean. First thing he says that he saw in the midst of the lampstands one like a son of man, or some of your translations may say one like the Son of Man. But in either case, there's no doubt that who John is talking about is Jesus. That term, Son of Man, refers to Jesus. Jesus used that term to refer to himself through his ministry. The Son of Man is also a prophetic statement that is found in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 4, Daniel is describing some of the visions that he has seen. And in Daniel chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, Daniel writes the following: I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So here, in the midst of the lampstands, was one like a son of man. So John turns around and he sees Jesus. He's telling us this is Jesus and this is what he looked like. The next description he gives us is he was clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. Now the robe resembles a priestly robe and is a symbol of religious authority. And then the golden sash, or some translations say a golden girdle, is an Old Testament symbol of power and righteousness and truth. Now, girding was done in two different ways in the Old Testament. One was typically it was girded around your loins. But here John says that this golden sash or this golden girdle was around his chest. And this is indicative of the Levitical priesthood. Again, his garment is showing, with the long robe and the golden sash, is showing Jesus' kingly and priestly office. Next, the hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. Of course, all throughout the Bible, white is a symbol of holiness and purity. In Isaiah 1, verse 18, it says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall become like wool." So here the contrast between our sin and being made holy, white like snow or like wool. Jesus' head was white like snow. He is holy. In Leviticus 19:2 it says, "Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." So John is telling us that Jesus is pure. He is holy. Next, his eyes were like a flame of fire. What does this mean? Well, this symbolizes Jesus' piercing gaze, the penetrating gaze that Jesus has, or he sees everything. The writer of Hebrews puts it well in Hebrews 4:13 when he says, "And no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give account." So his eyes are like flaming fire. They see everything. Nothing escapes Jesus' gaze. It's also an indication that of Jesus' indignation to the sin that he sees. You know, he sees everything, and he sees the sin rampant in our world. Nothing escapes his gaze. Next, his feet were like burnished bronze refined in a furnace. Scholars here aren't exactly sure what this means because John uses a Greek word that's kind of a combination of words, and he's the only one that uses it in the New Testament. It's only found here, and it can mean a couple different things. One thing it can mean is it's an alloy mixed of gold and silver. So the two precious metals, gold and silver, so that the shininess of it and just the value of it, of gold and silver. Another thing that it can mean is it's a brass that is the color of frankincense. And we know that frankincense is one of the gifts that the Magi brought to Jesus when he was born. And frankincense is used as an offering in the temple. So it has something to do with his worth, his wealth, or his, again, priestly station, and that he was a sacrifice, right? He was the sacrifice for us. Next, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. John is telling us that Jesus speaks with power. He speaks with authority, and his voice commands attention. And here's an interesting symbol or picture. From his mouth came a sharp, two-edged sword. And the best description of this, again, is found in Hebrews. The writer of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12, says, "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart." So Jesus' words are penetrating. They penetrate to our soul. They penetrate to our heart, discerning the thoughts and intentions of our heart. Finally, his face was like the sun shining in full strength. We might say that Jesus' face shined brighter than the noonday sun. What this reminds me of is God's Shekinah glory. Remember when Moses went on Mount Sinai and encountered God and then came back down and his face just shone with this Shekinah glory, the reflection of God's brightness, and the people couldn't even look at him. And God's Shekinah glory was seen in the tabernacle. When God's presence was in the tabernacle, it shined. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." So John is saying that Jesus' face was just so bright, it was like the brightness of the sun, indicating that he is God. God's Shekinah glory is seen in the face of Jesus. So bright that you can't really make out any of his features. It's just like the brightness of the sun. He is God in all his glory. So John has given us here the best way he could, a description of what Jesus looked like to him. And the Jesus that he saw in his vision looked nothing like the Jesus that he spent 3 years of ministry with. Because when Jesus was here on earth, he had a human body, so he looked like all of us. But now that he is in heaven, John got to see all the fullness of his heavenly glory. And then he's trying to describe in human terms this heavenly glory that no one has ever seen. And so he's trying to use human words and human descriptions to describe the heavenly glory of Jesus. As good of a job as John did here in describing Jesus, I think all of us, if we were to see Jesus in his heavenly glory, we are still going to be shocked. I don't think there's anything that we could picture in our mind that comes close to what Jesus is going to look like when he appears in all the fullness of his heavenly glory. Let's continue in Revelation 1, verses 17 through 19. Now John is going to tell us what Jesus said to him. "When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, 'Fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are and those that are to take place after this.'" So what John tells us is, he heard a voice and he turned around, and the vision that he saw of Jesus was so overwhelming that he fainted. He passed out. He fell to the feet of Jesus as if dead. And then Jesus spoke to him. And John tells us what he said, and we can learn, again, this is a revelation of Jesus. We can learn some more things about Jesus based on what he said. First, he tells John, "Fear not." Jesus spoke kind words to his beloved apostle. He laid his right hand on him, revived him and said, "Fear not." And that's a message for all of us. Those of us who have a relationship with Jesus Christ, those who are in the new covenant with Jesus, we have nothing to fear. We are the bride of Christ. We are his church. So when he comes back, we have nothing to fear. We are part of his family. So fear not. As the days approach and things get scary, fear not. And he says, "I am the first and the last." This reminds me of what he said in verse 8 when he said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty." So here Jesus is letting John know that he is the Lord. He doesn't look the same as he did when John saw him ascend into the cloud. So he's identifying himself. Look, it's me. It's the Lord. He's also letting him know that even though he looks different, he is the first and the last. He is the Alpha, the Omega. He is the Lord. Then Jesus says, "I am the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore." Here Jesus recounts his suffering. He's saying, "I'm the one that died on the cross. I'm the one that was buried, and I rose again, victorious over death." Then he goes on to tell John about the current power and authority that he has. He says, "I have the keys of death and Hades." Jesus said, "I conquered death. I live forever, and I have the keys over death and Hades." Even in our society, the one with the keys has authority. We have authority to unlock and lock things. We have the authority to open and close things. And Jesus says he has the keys to death and Hades. He has the power of the blessing of life, and he has the power over the punishment of death and Hades. So now we've seen what Jesus looked like to John and some of the things that he said to John. In verse 19, he said, "Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are and those that are to take place after this." So this is the second time that Jesus has now told John, write this stuff down. In verse 11, Jesus said, "Write what you see in a book, send it to the 7 churches." That first time, John must have had his back turned, and then he turned around, saw Jesus, and fainted. So Jesus revives John and repeats his instructions. Write this down. Jesus wanted all of the churches to have this information, so it's important for us to study it. It's important for us to understand it. Then, in verse 20, Jesus goes on to explain the vision that John saw, the 7 lampstands and the 7 stars. In verse 20, "As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." And those 7 churches are the ones Jesus referred to in verse 11, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Those are the 7 churches to whom this book was originally applied. This is the original audience, but it applies to us as well. This book was written and has been preserved so that all of the churches of Jesus are aware of what's going to take place. So John heard a voice, and he turned around, and he says he saw in the midst of 7 lampstands one like a son of man. Well, Jesus just told us the lampstands represent the church. So what John saw was Jesus walking among the church. And the message for us is that Jesus has not left us or forsaken us. Jesus is walking among his churches. He is still watching out for us. He is still here in our midst. He has not left us alone. Not only that, he says the 7 stars that were in his right hand represent the angels of the churches, the angels of the 7 churches. So each of the 7 churches that Jesus mentioned here has their own angel watching out for them. Not only is Jesus walking among the churches, he has put his right-hand men, as you would, in charge of overseeing the churches, watching out for the churches, taking care of the churches. And that leads me to wonder if Jesus saw fit to have John write down that these 7 churches have an angel watching over them, do all of Jesus' churches have an angel watching over them? Does Redvale Church have a specific angel that's responsible for us? Now, it doesn't specifically say that here, but I believe it's true. Angels are mentioned all through the book of Revelation. Over 50 times, angels are mentioned. Only 2 of the 22 chapters don't contain any mention of angels. 20 of the 22 do talk about angels. So how cool is it that Redvale Church has an angel specifically assigned to us? Not only is Jesus among us, but his angels are watching out for us. I think that's pretty cool. Now we're going to get into the specific messages to each of the 7 churches here in the coming weeks. But I just wanted to leave us with that image of the 7 lampstands, the 7 stars, and Jesus. So the 7 churches, the angels, and Jesus walking among them. So when things get scary, when things get out of sorts, just picture that Jesus walking among us. That he has not left us. He knows what we're going through. He's walking among his churches, and his angels are here watching over us. That should be comforting, a comforting image that John has given us here in the first chapter of Revelation. Jesus has not forsaken us. He has not left us. He is walking among us, and he has angels watching over us.